it's time to stop. Not to turn back, but to stand still and face the truth you've been avoiding. The narcissist never feared losing you. They only feared losing control over you. They fear your silence. They fear your indifference. They fear your decision to walk away without needing to explain, without anger, and without love. Because the moment you stop reacting, you don't just end the relationship, you shatter the entire script they once wrote for your life, and that's when their collapse begins. Today's video will not only expose the layers of a narcissist's psychological unraveling when you no longer care, it will also show you why silence is the most powerful weapon you've ever held. We'll walk through each stage: denial, rage, manipulation, and finally, ego collapse. So you can see that you don't need revenge, and you don't need to win. You only need to no longer belong to them. Subscribe if you've experienced emotional abuse and are on a journey to reclaim yourself, and don't look away. Because the final moment to this video will affirm what you need to hear most. You are on the right path, the path of freedom, of healing, and of a brand new beginning. Part 1, Denial. When the controller cannot accept that you've truly left. They used to believe you'd always be there. No matter how many times they grew cold, picked fights, manipulated you, or caused pain, in the narcissist's mind, you were still the central character in a play they directed. A role you would never abandon, a stage you would never exit. They believed you might get angry, might go silent for a while, but surely you would come back, because they never truly believed you had the strength to leave for good. They thought you need them like air. They were far too comfortable with the cycle they created. Hurt, apologize, charm, hurt again, but this time, you didn't come back. That's when denial takes over. When a narcissist no longer receives a reaction, be it rage, sorrow, or pleading, they don't see it as a sign that you've moved on. They see it as a strategy. They tell themselves, they're testing me. They want a reaction. They're still watching. This isn't a longing. It's a desperate need for confirmation that they still exist in your mind. In their world, you're not allowed an independent life. If you're silent, it must mean you're waiting to be chased. Why do they think that? Because they've conditioned you, often unconsciously, through repeated emotional manipulation. They've made you believe the relationship depended on your patience, that you needed to forgive one more time and again. So when you suddenly withdraw, without blame, without begging, without even a message, they don't know how to process it. They have no script for this scene. Their first reaction isn't sadness, it's rejection. They start rationalizing your disappearance. She's just busy. He's a little upset. He'll calm down. It's just a tactic to get attention. In the narcissist mind, denial is the shield that protects them from a painful reality. You're no longer in their orbit. You're no longer someone they can control. And worse, you no longer see them as significant. Then they begin to test the waters. In the subtlest, least risky ways. No dramatic phone calls or tearful pleas. Instead, a casual emoji on your post. A vague message, just checking if you're okay. A question passed to a mutual friend. Each of these actions has one goal: to see if you're still affected. They don't need you to come back yet. They just want a flicker of reaction, a sign that they still exist in your heart. Because to a narcissist, presence doesn't require love. They can survive off your anger, your longing, your guilt, any emotion, as long as it's directed at them. And when you don't respond, the quiet panic begins. They twist the reasons. Maybe you're just pretending to be strong. Maybe you're waiting for them to make the first move. Maybe you're faking indifference to punish them. In their mind, you couldn't possibly have truly let go, because if it did, it would destroy the grand illusion they've built of themselves, someone who is always needed, always central. In this stage of denial, the narcissist is suspended between doubt and deluded hope. Unable to accept the truth, they craft a softer version that soothes their ego. One where you're still watching, still waiting, still hoping for a small gesture that would bring you back. And it's this illusion that traps them in a spiral of expectation and disappointment. It's you, the one who once cried, once wrote novels of text messages, once begged for closure, now feel no urge to do anything at all. Not because you don't hurt, but because you've realized something greater. Silence is not a tactic, it is liberation. A declaration that you're no longer playing the role they cast for you. A wordless but powerful statement. I'm done. No need for drama. No need for validation. And that's when they start to lose their grip. No reaction, no reply, no mirror to reflect their identity. The narcissist begins to lose psychological gravity. They cannot keep their balance without you as a mirror to define their self-admission. And when denial begins to crack, they're not afraid of losing you. They're afraid of losing the version of themselves they once saw through your eyes. A self-admission fed and sustained by your gaze. Part 2, rebuilding control. When the narcissist refuses to let go, you are silent. Not a silence meant to attract attention, not a silence meant to win, but a deep, peaceful, and resolute silence. You no longer have hope, no longer carry anger, and have nothing left to say, and that throws a narcissist into a state of emotional chaos they can't comprehend. Because in their mind, someone who once loved them as deeply as you did, who endured and forgave like you did, couldn't possibly just stop. When their initial feelers fail to elicit a reaction, they move to the next phase, rebuilding control. Because to the narcissist, your absence isn't a sign of emotional maturity or personal liberation. It's a power vacuum that must be filled immediately. In their mind, you didn't walk away to heal. You walked away to challenge them, to be pursued, to initiate a new game, one they must now win. And so the game begins. But this time, arrogance gives way to calculation. They become adaptable, subtle, deep, at least in appearance. They send ambiguous messages like, "I think about you more than I expected." They reshare old memories on social media. They check in through mutual friends or send a coincidental gift. None of it stems from genuine remorse. It's all calculated manipulation designed to awaken emotion in you, any emotion, because they know one thing: if you react, even in anger, sarcasm, pain, or coldness, they still hold some sway over your mind. In their world, love or hate matters less than whether you're still affected. What they fear most isn't your hatred, it's your indifference. They don't see it as manipulation. In their mind, it's effort. It's fighting for love. It's not giving up. They'll tell others they're doing everything to make things right, that they've changed. And if your silence continues, they'll shift roles from the repentant to the victim. The transition is so swift, you begin to wonder if the person you once knew ever really existed. Then they start playing their stronger cards. They might bring up the sweetest moments of your relationship, recreate the image of a deep love, or mention the unfinished dreams you once shared. All of it is emotional bait, not to rebuild, but to lure you back into the game they've mastered. They don't want love, they want a response. And when you still remain silent, no emotion, no rebuttal, no resentment, they begin to truly panic. Because you're no longer participating in their script. You're no longer their counterpart, no longer the anchor they once used to reinforce their worth. And the truth they begin to sense, though they'll never say it, is that you didn't walk away to punish them. You walked away to live a life that no longer revolves around them. And that's what they cannot endure. When the narcissist realizes they can't provoke a reaction from you, their tactics shift from subtle to chaotic. They may lash out, accuse you of being cold, heartless, too independent. They'll paint you as the villain just because you're no longer wounded by them. In their eyes, your silence isn't healing. It's a crime against their ego. They don't understand. You're not playing the game anymore. You didn't walk away to be pulled back. You're not silent to be comforted. You simply ended the emotional bond they assumed would always remain. And because they can no longer affect you, they descend into disorientation. Not knowing what else to do, they keep reaching blindly, sending messages, showing up unexpectedly, even faking emergencies to reconnect. They believe if they can spark any emotion in you, the game might restart. But you're not that person anymore. You don't feel anger or pain or longing. You just feel empty when you think of that. And that emptiness is the narcissist's greatest nightmare. Because without your presence in their world, they're forced to face a brutal truth. They no longer have power. And they still smile for the world, post pictures with someone new, write life wisdom captions on social media, but it's all a hastily applied mask to cover a harsh reality. They've lost their most valuable supply, but one person truly saw them, who forgave, who hoped, and who ultimately let go. Part 3, the silent rage. When the narcissist's powerlessness becomes a storm beneath the surface. They once believed you would never dare to leave. They thought you were a fixed part of the world they constructed. Someone who would always forgive, always hurt, at just the right time, always react strongly enough to remind them of their importance. In the narcissist's mind, you were an infinite source of energy, a faithful mirror always reflecting their ego, no matter how distorted it was. But now, all of that has collapsed. You are not just silent. You haven't just disappeared. You no longer feel anything. And for someone who survives through the emotional reflection of others, that is utterly unacceptable. Their rage doesn't begin from heartbreak, but from the insult to their illusion of control. How dare they? That is the scream inside their mind. Not why are they hurting or what did I do wrong, but how dare they walk away without looking back? Why didn't they beg like before? How can they be at peace while I still exist? What they feel isn't sorrow, it's defiance. You, the one they once manipulated with a few cold texts or cutting words, are now completely beyond their influence. You didn't break down, you didn't beg, you didn't cry, you didn't scream. And that calm is a slap in the face to their illusion of power. From here, the smoldering fury begins to spread. But narcissists rarely erupt in loud, dramatic anger. They don't explode like someone genuinely wounded. Instead, their rage is masked, subtle, calculated, far more dangerous. They don't smash things or weep in front of you. They do something worse. They destroy you in silence. They begin rewriting the story. To others, they become the victim of a cold-hearted abandonment. They speak of you with a sorrowful tone. You were the one who changed, who became selfish, who forgot how to love. They slice and edit the memories, distort the truth, and paint a picture in which they're the wounded soul, and you the villain behind all the tragedy. Their rage morphs into words, glances, and calculated silences, all designed to pull you down by elevating themselves. But in truth, they're not doing this to defeat you. They're doing it to salvage the ego that's crumbling inside. They cannot bear the thought that you are living in peace without them. And so, in the shadows, they began to plot. They might approach your friends, planting seeds of doubt. They might post cryptic messages, suggesting they're in endorphic pain no one could understand. All of it is crafted to make you react, to anger you, to provoke you into reaching out to set the record straight. Because if you break your silence, even once, they can exhale. They still control a piece of you, but you are no longer the same. You don't react, you don't explain, you don't correct the record. You let them talk, let them perform, let them unravel in front of an audience that may never see through it. You are no longer playing that game. And that, more than anything, drives them mad. Because here is the truth. You don't need to react to protect the truth. You don't need to be believed to know your innocence. And you don't need to be defended to know you did the right thing, leaving a relationship in which only one of you truly loved. In this phase, the narcissist becomes more dangerous than ever, not because they might harm you, but because they are now harming themselves without even realizing it. They may dive into shallow relationships, rush into new love, or build a facade of having moved on just to fill the void you left behind. But with every forced moment of pretense, they are reminded no one reflects them the way you once did. And that is the true source of their rage. They're not angry because they lost you. They're angry because you saw their true self and still chose to leave. They're angry because you didn't just walk away from the relationship. You walked away from the illusion they built. And when you didn't look back, they realized the truth had won, not with noise, but with peace. And in that moment, when they see you no longer hurt, no longer weak, no longer needing validation, they are forced to face a truth they cannot endure. They lost the one person who ever truly loved them and destroyed it with their own hands. Part 4, rewriting the narrative when the manipulator casts you as the villain. They can't hurt you anymore. They can't make you angry, pull you back, or even get a reaction. And that's when the narcissist is forced to confront their greatest fear, complete powerlessness. With no more control, no more feedback, no more stage to perform on, they enter a new phase, distorting the truth in order to reclaim power through words, stories, and the pitying glances of outsiders. They can no longer control you, but they can still control the story about you. A narcissist does not accept defeat. To them, a relationship only ends if they walk away as the winner, even if that victory exists only in the eyes of others. When they can no longer bring you back, they begin crafting a new version of you, not the loving, forgiving soul who suffered because you believed in them, but a cold, cruel, incomprehensible villain. They become the storyteller. And like any skilled screenwriter, they don't need truth. They only need an audience that believes. You once loved them wholeheartedly, accepted what should never have been acceptable, stayed silent through pain, and forgave when you were the one who was wounded. But in the version they now tell, you're the one who walked away without explanation, the one who was selfish, heartless, unstable, controlling, even manipulative. And not once will they mention the things they did in the shadows. Why do they do this? Not out of hatred, but out of survival. A narcissist lacks a stable sense of self. They don't know how to own their mistakes, how to grow from pain. Instead of self-reflection, they construct a version of reality where they are never the problem. Because if they were at fault, they'd have to confront the truth they are too emotionally immature to handle, that they destroyed the one truly good thing that ever reached the humanity left within them. Your love. They rewrite the story, not just to fool others, but to fool themselves. In their version, you're no longer the light that once illuminated their buried wounds. You're the one who abandoned them when they were weak. You're no longer the patient healer of their broken pieces. You're difficult, judgmental, controlling. They turn your boundaries into control tactics, your silent pain into emotional manipulation. They cannot allow you to leave the relationship as the one who was right. Because if you were right, they were wrong. And for the narcissist, the worst thing isn't losing you. It's being seen for who they truly are and still not being chosen. You once saw them without the mask, without the costume of perfection they wore for the world. You touched the most vulnerable parts of them, the places that longed to be healed but feared being exposed. And when you walked away without a cruel word, without a fight, without needing to prove anything, you left behind something they can never fill. The truth. The truth that they no longer scare you, no longer make you cry, no longer hold the key to your self-worth. And that truth is more painful than any insult you could have spoken. But what unsettles them most is your silence. You don't defend yourself. You don't fight back. You don't scramble to protect your reputation. And that to them is incomprehensible. Because in the narcissist world, people are only silent when they've won, when there's nothing left to prove. And so your silence becomes the sharpest dagger, not stabbing them, but slicing through the mask they've worn their entire life. Without your response, they no longer have a rival. And without a rival, their story becomes a one-person monologue, one that no one truly cares to hear. They begin to see you everywhere, in the eyes of a new partner who can't quite see the hollowness inside them. In vague conversations where your name is the one they dare not speak, they begin to fear that the truth will emerge, not because it's shouted, but because it stands quietly, firmly, in peace. You no longer need to argue to prove you are right. You don't need to speak to protect your name. And that silence, the silence of someone who has truly let go, is the clearest sign that you've stepped out of the story they tried to write for you. You're no longer a supporting character in this self-centered world. You're the author of your own story, where truth doesn't need embellishment, it only needs to be lived. Part 5, the void, when the narcissist has nothing left to reflect. They once thought you were just a supporting role, someone who came and went, a source of emotional supply in the long-running script they've directed many times in their life. But there's one thing they never realized. You weren't just a source of energy. You were a mirror, a clear, honest mirror that reflected even the darkest parts they tried to hide. And when you disappeared, when you stopped reacting, stopped waiting, stopped searching for them in the dark, they didn't just lose a person. They lost the reflection they once relied on to define themselves. Narcissists don't build identity from within. They lack a solid sense of self rooted in internal values. Instead, they exist through the eyes of others, to be admired, desired, feared, or adored. So long as someone reflects back a sense of who they are, when you're no longer there to reflect them, they spiral into an existential crisis. Not because they loved you, but because they don't know who they are when no one is looking. You were once the honest gaze, the one who saw through their charming words and into their ruins, and still chose to love. Your love wasn't the kind they were used to. It wasn't blind admiration. It wasn't a scripted fairy tale. It was real, and that terrified them. Because to be truly seen is to be exposed. And once seen, the narcissist has nowhere to hide. They can't manipulate you the way they do others. They can't keep controlling your emotions forever. And when you let go, you didn't just leave the relationship, you took away the final mirror that reflected who they really were. And so the emptiness begins. It's not the sorrow of a typical breakup, not the aching nostalgia of lost love. It's the hollow ache of a soul without a center. A person who has always barred others' emotions to locate themselves in the world. Without you, they no longer have a reason to feel important. Without you, they're no longer reflected as charming, misunderstood, or deep. And worse, there's no longer anyone to reflect their cruelty either. So they lose all sense of placement. They might still smile on social media, still go out, still have someone known, but deep inside they begin to fade in their own mind. Because narcissists don't have an inner dialogue. They don't know how to face their emotions without someone else playing the role of interpreter. They only know how to feel when those feelings are mirrored externally. And when that mirror disappears, when you are no longer angry, no longer lingering, no longer looking back, they begin to vanish within themselves. That's when the questions arise. Who am I if no one needs me? Who am I if no one loves, hates, or reacts to me? For most people, those questions can spark a journey of awakening. But for the narcissist, they are a form of spiritual hell. Because answer, who am I? They must peel off all the masks. And the most terrifying thing for them isn't being hated. It's being ignored. Left in silence. Made invisible. Without you, they have nowhere to pour their emotions. No one to blame, to define them, or to validate their identity. The people around them may still exist, but no one has seen them the way you once did. And that is a pain they cannot name. They try to fill that void with new people, temporary emotional stand-ins. They attempt to recreate the reflection, seek out new eyes that admire, new hearts that tolerate, but what they quickly realize is those new people don't know them the way you did. They may be easier to control, more compliant, less resistant, but they lack the depth. You were the only one who saw through it all and still stayed for a while. And that's why your absence is not a temporary gap. It's a permanent crack in the fragile structure of their ego. In that void, many narcissists enter a quiet panic. They lose sleep. They become triggered by minor things. They feel anxious without knowing why. But they don't know how to name those emotions because they were taught early on to run from feelings, not to understand them. And at the deepest level of that panic lies a primal fear, I don't exist if no one is watching me. Without you, they become blurry, not to the world, but to themselves. Everything that once supplied them, your gaze, your disappointment, your kindness, is gone. And so they float in an empty space, void of depth, of light, of grounding, but you are different. You didn't lose yourself when you lost them. On the contrary, that you found yourself when you walked away from them. While they struggled to exist through the eyes of others, you begun learning how to exist through your own. Your absence is not a punishment. It is the natural consequence of someone who never knew how to value the loving presence you once offered. Part 6. The search for a replacement. When the narcissist desperately tries to fill the void you left behind. When you go silent, withdraw, and refuse to be the stage for their performance, the narcissist doesn't stop to heal. They don't turn inward to face themselves. Instead, they run away from the emptiness, from the invisible panic that rises when there's no one left to manipulate, to reflect them, or to feed their emotional hunger. And in that panic, they begin to search, not for love, not for genuine connection, but for a replacement, a new supply that can help them feel worthy again, even if that worth is pure illusion. The search happens fast, almost instantly. They might part ways with you one day and show up the next in photos holding hands with someone new. To the uninformed, this looks like healing, like they're moving on. But you know the truth. Narcissists don't move forward. They slip from one person to another, from one illusion to the next. The new person isn't chosen for compatibility. They're chosen for their availability, for how easily they trust, how quickly they give, how effortlessly they can be idealized. Because the narcissist doesn't need a real person to love. They need a new mirror, as clear and polished as possible, to reflect back the idealized version of themselves they want to believe in. You used to be that mirror, but you reflected the truth, the good and the broken. You no longer fit the role because you stopped cooperating with their illusion, so they look for someone else. At first, everything looks perfect. Sweet photos, public declarations of affection, status updates subtly saying I've finally found someone who appreciates me. But you know better. This isn't love, it's theater. And the only audience they truly want to impress is you. They hope you'll see those images and feel pain, jealousy, regret. They want you to question your decision to leave, to wonder, is the new person better than me? Have they really changed? But that's just the tip of the iceberg. The part beneath is a truth they'll never admit. The new person can't replace you. This new person may be more compliant, more persuadable, more willing to accept things you used to draw boundaries around, but what they lack is the deep perception you once offered, that gaze of yours that made the narcissist feel simultaneously exposed and seen, a gaze they hated because it revealed their falsehoods, but also missed because it was the only thing that ever touched what was still human in them. The new person doesn't see the cracks, doesn't recognize the recycled behavior patterns, doesn't notice these sweet words or lines from a script performed 100 times. But you noticed. You were there. And you woke up. And that's why you can't be replaced. The narcissist isn't looking for someone new because they've forgotten you. They're looking because they can't bear being forgotten. They don't need love. They need a reaction. They don't want intimacy. They want ego reinforcement. And they're not searching for another you. They're searching for a more compliant version of you. One who won't ask questions, won't walk away, won't see the emptiness behind the mask. But no matter how hard they try, no matter how many times they recast themselves as the perfect romantic lead in a brand new love story, they can't forget you, not out of love, but because of the threat you once posed, the truth. You saw them without the illusion. You didn't love their charm or their promises. You loved the small, wounded part of them you believed was worth saving. And when you walked away without drama, without a grand finale, you took with you the only thing that ever made them feel real, your honest gaze. No one else can give them that. No one else ever wakes so deeply and still chose to leave. And that's what traps them in a loop, repeating the role, recycling the I love yous, reenacting tired gestures. But with every repetition, they grow more weary, more hollow, closer to the truth they fear most. No one will ever reflect them as clearly as you once did, and they destroyed it with their own hands. So they keep searching, keep performing, keep swapping out mirrors, hoping one might finally reflect the goodness they don't truly possess. But no mirror shines bright enough, none go deep enough, because the only light that ever illuminated their true self was the one that turned away and stops reflecting. Part 7, the collapse of the ego. When the narcissist no longer recognizes themselves. A tactic has been tried, a role has been played, they've been the passionate lover, the heartbroken victim, the misunderstood hero, yet none of it brought you back. No message received a reply, no action stirred a response, and your silence, instead of being gentle, has become the harshest mirror, exposing the truth they've always tried to escape. No one believes in them anymore. And worse, they no longer believe in themselves. This is no longer about rage, no longer about control. This is the total collapse of the ego. The moment the narcissist must confront the one question they've spent a lifetime avoiding: who am I if no one is watching me? Since childhood, they learned to define themselves not through intrinsic value, but through others' reactions. If someone loved them, they felt lovable. If someone was angry at them, they felt important. If someone needed them, they felt powerful. But now, with you no longer being the mirror, no longer offering even a thread of emotional response, they no longer know who they are. Isn't the loss of you that causes the crisis? It's the loss of the mechanism that confirmed their existence. They don't know how to live without reflection. No one is angry. No one is crying. No one is pleading. No one fears losing them. And for someone who survives on feeling like the center of the universe, that is the end of their entire reality. This collapse unfolds quietly, like an internal flood. They still go to work, still smile at people, still boast about new achievements, but their eyes begin to hollow. Sleep becomes restless. They fall into a state of quiet unease, where even they can't make sense of their own emotions. They may try to reconstruct themselves through quick relationships, new projects, a change of scenery, or a different look, but nothing reaches the core that's cracking inside. Because what they've truly lost isn't you, it's the identity they thought was real, which only existed while you were still there to reflect it. Without you, the mask began to fall. Without someone to admire them, they are no longer admirable. Without someone to challenge them, they are no longer strong. Without someone to love them, they are no longer lovable. And slowly, they become invisible to themselves. This is the point where most narcissists lack the capacity for internal healing, where a person with emotional maturity would use this pain to reflect, to heal, to rebuild. But a narcissist lacking self-awareness and the ability to take responsibility only knows how to panic. They don't know how to hold themselves in solitude. They don't know how to name emotions without assigning blame. And so they no longer recognize the person in the mirror. Not in a literal sense, but psychologically. They no longer feel connected to the image they once saw through the eyes of others. The ego doesn't collapse in a single moment. It disintegrates slowly from the inside out as every external source of emotional validation dries up. They might say, "I'm fine." They might laugh and post photos like nothing happened. But inside, they're sinking. Not because of anything you did, but because of everything you no longer do. The death isn't loud. It's the hollow echo inside them each morning when they wake up and realize, you're gone. No one left to fight for. No one left to win back. No one left to manipulate. No one left to prove I still matter. Your silence, once just a response, has become an undeniable truth. They no longer have any power over you. And in their distorted world, that means they no longer exist. They can't confess this collapse to anyone. They can't cry like others. They can't ask for help, because doing so would mean admitting defeat. All they're left with is a loneliness so profound that no language can describe it. In that loneliness, they may act out impulsively, destructively, repeating old patterns. But it's not because they want to change. It's because they're desperate to escape the void. Then you don't need to look back. Not because you're cruel, but because you understand. No one can save someone who refuses to face themselves. You weren't the one who caused their collapse. You were simply the first who dared to stop reflecting them. And that, not your anger, is the deepest wound left in their soul. Part 8, the quiet ending. When you walk away and they remain trapped in their endless loop. There was no screaming, no heartbreaking goodbye, no final hug, no tears left to cry. The relationship between you and the narcissist didn't end in an explosion, but in a chilling stillness. You didn't slam the door, you simply walked away, quietly, without a trace, without explanation. And in that silence, you didn't just end a relationship, you ended an entire script they never imagined you'd be strong enough to escape. They didn't believe we were really gone. At first they thought it was temporary. A silent treatment, a tactic to provoke panic, a move to make them come running. But time passed, you stayed silent. You didn't look back. You no longer needed their validation. And that's when they realized you didn't just walk away from them, you walked away from the distorted world they tried so hard to pull you into. There was no slamming door, but the finality was ice cold. You walked away with a heart still wounded, but beating for you this time. You didn't need revenge, you didn't need to win. You just needed to stop being trapped in the endless emotional game, a game they always won by making you bleed. Meanwhile, the narcissist stayed behind. Not alone, but imprisoned within the very cycle they created. They spin between new victims, recycled roles, empty promises, and illusions of power that never last. But no matter how far they go, how many new faces they collect, the story remains the same. And you are the only one who ever dared to escape it without asking for permission. And that is what they cannot bear. Not because they still love you, not because they truly miss anything real, but because they can't accept that you're no longer playing. To them, silence isn't closure, it's the ultimate insult. Because your silence didn't come from pain, it came from healing. They may smile, they may appear radiant in new photos, happy with someone else. They may tell stories to prove they're doing just fine, better even. But you know the truth? It's the residue of someone who never learned how to exist without being seen by others. Inside them, there is no closure, no peace, no acceptance, only the endless spin of manipulation, control, and fear of being forgotten. They may try to recreate your relationship with someone new, repeating the gestures, the words, the promises you once heard, but no one will reflect them the way you did. And for that reason, no matter how many new people pass through, you remain the only one who ever truly saw them and still walked away. You're the one who forgave, the one who waited for them to grow, the one who believed that if you loved them enough, they would finally have the courage to change. But then you realize no one can heal a person who refuses to look at their own wounds. And that's when you stopped, not out of cruelty, but because your survival demanded it. When you walked out of their life, you didn't just give up on a person. You gave up on the illusion that you could save someone by sacrificing yourself. And in doing so, you didn't become the winner of a love war. You became the victor of your own life. No need to prove anything. No need for their acknowledgement. No need for emotional justice. Just one simple truth. You chose yourself. They will never recognize you as the good one. They will never admit you truly love them. They will never retell the story the way it actually happened. But none of that matters anymore because you no longer need them to tell your story. You're writing a new one where you're the main character, no longer orbiting around someone else's distorted ego. In their world, you are the betrayer. In your world, you are the survivor, and that difference is your freedom. You don't need them to see that you're okay. You only need to be okay in a way only you can truly understand. No need for a late apology. No need for them to admit you were right or that they ever loved you. In truth, you don't need anything from them anymore, and that is what marks the true ending. The end wasn't when you walked away. It was when you no longer looked back hoping for something. They once believed you couldn't survive without him, that your silence was just a tactic. But when you didn't react, didn't lash out, didn't need to explain, they began to realize you didn't just leave, you outgrew them. And while they're still playing the same game with a different face, you've started writing a new chapter in your life. One no longer defined by pain or manipulation, but by the freedom you reclaimed. That is something they can never take back. You don't need revenge because you're no longer hurting. You don't need to clarify the truth because you've been true to yourself, and you don't need to win because the peace you now have is your victory. If you ever doubted, ever questioned whether you did the right thing by letting go, let me tell you this. You didn't just do the right thing, you saved yourself. And that is the bravest act a wounded soul can ever perform. You don't need anyone to validate your story because right now you're living a new chapter. One where no narcissist holds the lead role. There's only you, your light, your growth, and the seeds of life that never had the chance to bloom while you were still trapped in their shadow. Hold on to this peace like a vow to yourself. And if this video touched something deep within you, if you're walking the path of healing after toxic manipulation, then hit subscribe. We have so many more empowering, soulful messages to help you keep rising, stronger, wiser, and freer every single day. You deserve that.